Hi everyone, my name is Julie Boer. I'm with Greenfield Belzer. I'm a marketing coordinator here and I will be helping to moderate our discussion today. I'd like to welcome you to another webinar in our brand thinking series. Today we're going to cover content management systems untangled. As we get ready to start, please make sure that all of your phones are muted. This will prevent any background noises and ensure everyone can hear the full presentation. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please chat them. You'll see a little questions section in your GoToMeeting chat window. We're going to hold all questions until the end, but we'll have plenty of time to address as many as possible. Finally, I'd like to encourage you all to join us via social media during the presentation. We will be tweeting from our own GBLTV handle using the hashtag GBWebinar. Let me go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Joe Walsh is the Principal and Creative Director with Greenfield Belzer, working with marketing challenge clients of all shapes and sizes inside the professional services sector and out. I'd also like to introduce our second speaker, Adam Mishinchi, who is a tech lead here at GB. Adam is a web developer and performs technical consultations on both internal and then external client projects. Adam's going to be assisting with our Q&A section at the end of the presentation. So Joe, I'd like to go ahead and pass it over to you, and we will get started on Content Management Systems Untangled.
Great. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. We probably have 30 minutes of content to share, and then we'll save another 30 for questions until you get worn out and go back to doing your business. Julie, I assume you can hear me okay on your end?
Yes, you sound great, Joe.
All right, so let's jump in. I'm by the way, Joe and Adam's roles here, so I'm a business and creative person who, by virtue of my job, needs to explain technology to people, and I rely on Adam and the rest of our crack technologists to do so. They all speak plain English and do so in business terms, so at the end when we're turning it over to questions, you'll probably hear more from Adam than me. We'll play Stump Joe in this, which won't be too hard to do. Let me set up this presentation for you. Many of us, or I should say many of you, know Greenfield Belzer as a brand strategy and design firm, and you know, that's our calling card. It's our claim to fame. We're very good at it. But because most of our work these days involves the web, we're also pretty savvy technologists. And so we're going to share, you know, many of the questions and many of the insights that we've gathered through the years about content management systems. I will say that if you're interested in kind of design ideas, this isn't the program for you, but go to our website and there's lots of case studies and best practices and principles on the design side of the CMS equation. But I also want to recommend the tech section of our website. It's meant to help people make good decisions, and it's built to help you make good decisions about technology. And so you'll find articles, you'll find research papers, you'll find some of what I'm sharing today, but there's more there. I also want to say, you know, just to come clean here, that, you know, Greenfield Belzer as a developer offers a proprietary CMS called Point and Click, but half of the work we do is in other systems. We're relatively or fully tech agnostic. The point is to help you find a CMS that fits your needs. So having said that, we'll jump in. I do want to tip my cap to one piece of research that you may find on our site that's a little broader than CMS's, but it's still worth a look at. It's called the Marketing Ecosystem. If you haven't seen it, it's now roughly a year old. What we did was research and plot and try to make sense of all the technologies we use in doing our marketing and branding work these days. One caveat is it's a year old, and because technology changes so fast, some of the recommendations in it are getting dated. But so, you know, such is technology, right? So you're going to see graphs, wires, plumbing, home home entertainment walls, cheeseburgers, surgeons, and crows used in this presentation. And I'm apologizing in advance for the mixed metaphors. It takes a village to build a presentation like this, and a lot of us have our own devices for explaining complex things. So it's my job to knit all those things together, but yeah, the metaphors are flying everywhere, as you will see. We do this research. Some of you who have joined us for programs like this in the past, know that we're famous for our research, and the reason we do it is that our clients are lawyers and accountants and consultants who all have opinions, just like Stephen Colbert does, who says, I'm not a fan of the facts. The facts can change, but my opinion will never change no matter what the facts are. So we're trying to replace opinion with fact, and that's part of the reason we're looking at this agenda together today. So here's the 5 items we're going to cover. What is a CMS and what does it do? Any of you technologists on the line, if you're rolling your eyes, that's okay, but we're just going to take a rudimentary look. We're going to talk about flexibility and what a CMS can't do. You'd be amazed at how confused we all get about this flexibility issue, including us. We'll briefly cover open source versus proprietary as it applies to CMSs. We'll address confusion source. It's kind of fun with this gathering of crows thing. You'll see what I'm getting to in a moment, and then the right questions to ask. As I said at the top, I don't have all the answers, but I do have good questions for you to ask as you're considering either a new or an improved CMS. So, from the top, what is the CMS and what does it do? Again, this is rudimentary. Don't roll your eyes at me. A CMS serves as an interface between your web content, or I should say, yeah, your web content and your data, and then your display. So on the left is a database, in the middle is your CMS, and on the right is your website display. The CMS is an intermediary between marketing content and distribution modes. It can publish to websites, to email alerts, to proposals. Many of the most advanced CMSs are now digital marketing systems. They're full enterprise systems that publish all your marketing content. But many CMSs just work on websites, and that's okay. But the point is that a CMS is the intermediary. The job it does is to allow marketing people, like many of the folks on the phone here today, who are non-technical users, they're not programmers, they're not Adam, to manage different types of data on their own, things like images and videos and narratives, text, audio. The job is to eliminate the arm's length distance between, the tech folks and the marketing folks, and put marketers in the driver's seat. By the way, Julie, who's our host, that's her pictured in her sporty new mouse that you can see on our website. All right, so the best CMS, and there are a ton, and I only have 6 here on the page. There's literally 50 I could put on this page. But the best are easy to use, and they're fitted to the task you're trying to accomplish. So we have a range here. We have some of the open source solutions like WordPress and Drupal and Joomla. Some of the more proprietary and complex ones like Sitecore, and then representing some of the professional service proprietary or vertical CMSs. Point and Click is one that we market and use. On any given day, we're likely to use WordPress as well, but Content Pilot, just in fairness, is another great vertical CMS that serves folks in the professional services space. So that's roughly what a CMS does, and I know you know that. So let's get into the nitty-gritty, and let's talk about flexibility and what a CMS can't do. And I speak for all design and development shops when I walk you through this set of slides. We, as a category of providers, get painted with a brush that says, oh, you nickel and dime us, and those nickel and dimes really add up, and we want to be able to change things on the fly, and you don't give us that flexibility. So I want to take a moment and just talk about what a CMS can and cannot do, and I'm going to use a rough analog here, and basically I'm saying a CMS can't alter your display without a cost. So what you have on the left is your beautifully built by a carpenter, shelving unit at home, and you had it custom made to fit into your house. It displays your books and your photos and your favorite vase and your knickknacks and paddywhacks from your various travels, and you love it. And a year passes or two passes, and you invest in a great new flat screen, and you want to put it into your display wall. So you got two options. One, you take your Sawzall out and you just cut it to pieces and make it fit. Or the other is you call the custom cabinet maker back and he does what you see on the right-hand side. You also call Time Warner and have them put a cable box in and a hole in the wall to pipe in your content, right? So if you take that analog and bring it into the web world, you have a sample template here. This is Parker Poe's private equity practice page. Parker Poe is a law firm in the Carolinas. Great design, nice content. But what I want to do is start to point out what can and can't be changed with a CMS. So let's just look at it. You can't move the logo because it was designed to go there, right, without going back to your developer. You can't move the sub-navigation to another piece of real estate on the page, but you can with a CMS. You could change the title from profile to description. You could add more sub-navigation, and you can do that as long as the space accommodates the amount of sub-navigation you want to add. When you get down into the narrative, your design process has landed you on a style sheet, if you will, styles of type and styles of color and headline sizes. You can't change those styles, but you can clearly change all the content in here and make it say whatever you want. You can also place in pictures or diagrams or charts and maps and graphs and videos and the like. But you can't take this whole narrative space and move it over here. Just continuing that, navigation up on the top. You can't move your navigation without going back to your developer, but you can change the names of it. The best CMSs allow you to reorder navigation if you like, as long as it works within this space you've allotted in the design and wireframing process. On the right-hand rail are key selling messages, which we advocate, and you can't move those to other spots on the page, but you can replace them with other key selling messages. You put in other photos. You put in other accolades, you put in other case studies. You can even, if you have it, you could put video on the side if your site has been programmed and designed to accommodate video in its display. And I just want to take the analog a step further, from my shelving unit to another page in the site, and here's a bio. And this is for Pointer Spruill. Randy Adams at Pointer Spruill, and just to ice the point on what you can't and can't do. You can switch out his picture if he or she's complaining that they look not in the best possible light and they want a new picture. You can switch out the quote, right? You just can't move his picture to another part of the page. You can change his name if he gets married and takes on another name. Probably a bad analogy. You can change the content in here at will and add more content, charts and graphs and maps and videos. You just can't change the styling. All right, and on the right-hand rail, obviously with your relationships, if he takes on a new practice area, you add one in, but you just can't move this stuff willy-nilly around the page. So, you've heard of web templates. I've just shown you web templates. They are not your CMS. They're a structured page design. And you can have several page designs, as most of you do. And the best sites don't use just one template. They have some variety. All we're asking you to remember, when you think about the CMS problem to untangle is that there's a lot of flexibility in all the modern CMSs in publishing content, but not in redesigning pages. So that's a key takeaway. I do want to get into cheeseburgers for a moment and just finish this point on flexibility. There's clearly a give and take between the display on the right-hand side and the database on the left, and it's pretty strict, all right, with code. When you really want to think about it, your web page doesn't exist. It's pulled together when a visitor asks for it. It goes and calls the database to find a bio, for example, and to bring cheeseburgers into the fold. McDonald's, for example, no longer has a burger waiting for you under a heat lamp, you hope. The burger's assembled when you ask for it to order, like hold the pickles, whatever. And it's the same for your web page. So when a visitor asks for a biography, the database goes and draws that information and builds it, to fit the template on the right-hand side. But if the database, calls for a tortilla wrap and it hasn't been specified, then it's not going to get served up. All right. So again, there are demands that a CMS makes on a database to get to display. People like Adam call them path structures, but the point is, you can change a lot of content on pages and shuffle them around and rename them, but you can't change the design at will. And I hope that's clear. Wireframing is just a fancy term for getting to a design. Many of you have been through this. It's another way to think of a template. It's really a blueprint. That's why doing wireframes are so important up front. I want the vanity and the toilet to go here and here, and they're connected to plumbing. A good CMS, the best ones, are not restrictive to design. They give designers a lot of freedom, and the only limit on page design should really be the imagination of your designer and the courage of the client, you guys, to do something bold and different. All right? Again, but once it's coded, outside of the words and images and text and such, CMS flexibility has its limits, just as I've tried to explain with Analog. So let's move to open source and proprietary. We get this question in every proposal we receive these days. And it's another complex subject. There's opinions on either side of this. This is also kind of rudimentary, but I want to give you the basics. So open source on the left, proprietary on the right. Open source is quote-unquote free and flexible. We just talked about one aspect of flexibility. Proprietary comes with a license fee, right? And you gulp when you see it in your line item proposal. Open source is built by a community of developers, kind of kumbaya, let's all do this together. It's got, a small d democratic benefit to it, right? And the proprietary is built by a proprietor, someone who owns the software. Open source tends to be industry agnostic. It wears kind of a floppy hat that flips or fits everybody. Proprietary systems tend to be built for an industry, like professional services or associations or banks, right? Open source tends to be good at a lot of things, but really not wonderful at any. And proprietary is better because it's been built for an industry for specific needs in an industry or a business like yours. So I'll give you an example. An association, the CMS for an association would have a membership directory. Or in the professional service world, the proprietary systems tend to make it really easy to build relationships between your attorneys, we'll say, in their offices or the articles they wrote. All right? Open source, you can go, this is what flexibility means. You can go anywhere for service, call up any developer and let he or she try to crack the code. And the proprietary is serviced by the owner, of course, because they own it. And then lastly, open source tends to be less secure because it's open and lots of developers are in it, and proprietary generally is more secure. So a couple of points on open source versus proprietary. We just want to let you go in open eyes here. And the advantage to open source, the dominant one is it's free, but remember, nothing is free. And by the way, we do open source sites, so it's just go in with your eyes open. I'll state it again. You need to consider the total cost of ownership or getting the open source CMS to safely and dependably do what a proprietary system was built to do, like build relationships, between attorneys and offices, for example. We love our information graphics here at Greenfield Belzer, but let me just explain this to you briefly. Generally there's a correlation between the cost of a solution and the size of a firm. The enterprise level solutions, the big proprietary ones like Sitecore have really big and obvious upfront costs that scare away a lot of buyers. But we just want you to know that open source solutions have hidden costs that should also scare away some buyers. So I'll give you an example, like WordPress. It's great, it's free, it's gaining popularity, it's out of the box, it's easy to install. But WordPress or any open source solution, it may not necessarily wind up saving you money in the long run because it depends on which core features are really important to you and whether those features are easy or difficult to implement. Do you need a coder to go in and redo a section? Okay? So weigh that. The point is, think when you're talking to vendors, think about the total cost of ownership. And also think about this, when you customize an open source CMS, when you make it do what it needs to do for you, it becomes proprietary. And guess what? You're the proprietor. So a lot of our clients opt for, we're going proprietary because we know who we can choke. We call it the one throat to choke model if it doesn't work. There's simply a more direct line of responsibility in proprietary models, and sometimes there are in open source, which is owned or co-owned, by a community of developers. Last point, telling a non-technical business person like me, and maybe some of you, that open source is more flexible or better is like telling a patient that one plastic surgeon's better than another because it's, that surgeon's going to give you the freedom to operate on yourself. The point is you can't, right? And so we just want you to remember, if the plan feature to change your display, to keep up, to constantly make display renovations to your site, then you're always going to have to go back to your developer for changes. You're beholden to the coder, whether they're an open source coder or a proprietary coder. All right. So let's talk about the source that we hear of confusion, and we've titled this "The Gathering of Crows." By the way, we have an article that parallels this presentation called "The Gathering of Crows," and you can find that on our website too. But here you have pictured the IT team, the vendors, and marketing. Everyone has a say in this, and you're in the middle, all right? And you're the CMO or the marketing director or whatever your intergalactic head of business development, whatever your title is. So here's the reality. Everyone has an agenda, and it's not yours. And by the way, we're in Web 3.0 now. All of us have been burned in some form or another with a website. And here's what some of them look like, those burns. The vendor was really charming, but they went belly up 18 months after launch, and I got left in the lurch. The vendor was reliable, but in 6 months, their CMS was out of date. It didn't have all the features that someone else had that we covet now, which is the point here. Another CMS I missed in our search had more better features, right? another scenario, the IT boys or girls knew networks, but they didn't know websites. But they're IT, right? It says so on their business card, and they threw their weight around with our C team and said, we have to do it this way. Sound familiar? Speaking of that, the IT department loved SharePoint, and they wanted to build the whole site themselves on SharePoint, and because they were experimenting, the whole site was delayed by months. The marketing team, well, they've been through it at another firm and learned a lot, and they're very vocal about what they like and don't like, even if they don't completely understand the technology. And then lastly, we've all seen this before, our marketing partner's brother's nephew had a friend who told me X, Y, or Z, right? So what's a highly competent, somewhat tech experienced, slightly tech literate, frustrated executive supposed to do? And this brings us full circle to the start of our presentation and the notion of asking the right questions. And I want to take you through a few of them right now, add some color commentary, and then we're going to turn turn the mic over to you guys to ask some additional questions. Now, before I go into the questions, just one tip. We learned in this marketing ecosystem study that there isn't a final holy grail solution. It just simply doesn't exist. The only change is constant. Technology is, by its very definition, the change business. And so we're just dealing with that. And so the decision you need to make can never be final. All right? So what we'd ask you to do is start with the question, does the CMS you're looking at now, or the ones you're looking at now, have the features you want here and now? And here's some tools, some additional questions. You can help yourself by knowing which features and functions are important to you and knowing why they're important to you. All right? We want you to distinguish, when you build a list in your RFP, distinguish between must-have items and nice-to-have items. All right? Rate them. It's coming near holiday season, so make a list and check it twice. Lists are great. And by the way, I believe in our tech section we have a sample list for you to build on. And we want you to understand that today's features are becoming less and less relevant for a couple of reasons. One, there's the cloud, which is helping folks like us push new features out to clients, but also because the features arm race is nearly over in the CMS category, and most of the providers, whether they're open source or proprietary, have similar features. Okay? But on the cloud, I do want you to ask about the future, even if there isn't a final holy grail solution for the future. Ask if the CMS is in the cloud. And there's a reason for that, which ties to the second question. Ask, are new features pushed as available on some set schedule? And how frequently are those enhancements delivered? And most importantly, you want to ask, is there a cost in implementing the enhancements? All right? So all of us, or many of us, have just switched to iOS 7. If you're an Apple user, I'll tell you the cost I had in implementing the switch, which came from the cloud, which was easy to do. Because I'm a somewhat tech illiterate, I managed to wipe out all my contacts, which I hadn't backed up. And Nantha, our IT guy, told me to do it, but I forgot to read the memo. So there are costs, and we just want you to go in understanding them. There's a reason on our tech platforms part of our website that there's clouds everywhere. You know, the clouds are the future. There's an advantage to a CMS being in the cloud. I won't go into it deeply here, but the biggest advantage is that new features can be pushed to you without a lot of effort by either us, your other developers, or by you receiving it on your end. Biggest thing about a CMS, in our view, and it should be in yours too, is Is it easy to use, and is it easy to learn? Marketing teams turn over quickly in our professional services world. That's reality. You want somebody who can come in and pick it up immediately, keeping things fresh. You can help yourself at the outset when you're assessing ease of use by knowing that there's a difference between ease of installation and ease of use. WordPress is very easy to install. It may not be the easiest to use if you want it to do certain things within the context of your business. I'm not picking on those guys. By the way, we're doing WordPress sites at the moment. And I just want you, again, to have all these bits of data. Getting a demo is obvious, and most of you do this. And having a great list of questions like some of these I've shared is very important in the demo. Our real recommendation to you is when you're doing a demo, don't have the lawyers sit in on the demo. Don't have the accountants sit in on the demo. Your CEO doesn't care about the demo. I don't even think the CIO cares about the demo. The people who should do the demo are the people who use the system every day, and what you want to check for is if they smile during the demo and say, wow, that's going to make my life easier. Or if they grimace and say, oh my God, this, what's the polite word? This is not going to make my life easier. Okay? Seems like common sense. You know, the best CMSs are intuitive. Anybody can pick them up. They're easily learned without going through a training doc. And again, they're easy to use. This is one screenshot from our own proprietary system. The other thing within the professional service context that I think is obvious, but I don't want to just skate by it, is it easy to relate content? All right, can I, as I've alluded to before, can I, you know, associate all my accountants with the internal audit practice, or with the financial services industry, or with the publications they've been involved in that have to do with internal audits in financial services? And can I relate case studies to offices, or case studies to industries, or case studies to practice areas? It's a labor of love to do all this work for those of you who operate CMSs, and easy relationships are vital. Now, just to illustrate the point, Dowlonis is a DC law firm who launched their site a month ago. It's very sharp and you know, well put together, has great messaging, but it's an industry-based message. But when you go behind, you know, when you go inside to get to the communications industry page, well, look at all the related content. Here's case studies, here's people, here's the photos to relate, here's the practice areas that relate, you know, recent accolades and proof points to relate. So the ease of doing all that is imperative. All right, last couple of points before questions. Does the CMS deliver the flexibility you require? And I've already talked about flexibility. I want you to know what flexibility means to you when you're sending out your RFP or interviewing firms. And we also want you to know that there's a difference between a CMS's flexibility, as we've shown, and the flexibility of the site design and display. So if flexibility means I can go to a different developer, that's one thing. If flexibility means I can change out narrative copy, that's another. If flexibility means I want to fundamentally change the design of my page, that's a third thing. So know what flexibility means to you. And just flashing this up quickly to remind you of the points made earlier. Is your team an aggressive user? And there's a continuum here from those who like to set and forget their sites to those who have you know, a 15, 20 person web team who are constantly making the site hum, you know, with fresh content and new thought leadership and the like. We want you to know if you're going to, when you come into an assessment stage, if you're going to be making a lot of structural changes frequently. We want to know if you're going to be adding pages and stretching the capabilities of your CMS. You want to talk to your team and get an accurate idea of what you're doing now with your site and what the future state is. So I'll give you an example. We have a great client right now that's in the throes of a new brand and site design. But one of the features of the new brand is a major investment in thought leadership. So this isn't the client, but what they're envisioning doing is turning their news and events page, which is in some cases an alphabetical list of articles published, like in the form of directory assistance, and morphing that into a McKinsey-like, resource center, like our client Archer Norris has done, that has more of an editorial look and feel and feels like the contents page on the front of Fortune magazine. So if you envision this kind of future, you need not only different design, but you need your CMS to be able to stretch to do different things. Speaking of stretching, is it scalable? You want to help yourself by using your analytics to know your current load times and then estimate reasonable increased load times as you're evaluating your CMS and making sure that your CMS can handle, say, 1,000 professionals instead of 500. That tacks to the second point. Does your plan call for a merger in the next year? And have you factored that into your CMS decision? And then last couple points here. Is it secure? We live in a hacking world where smart folks like Adam, he doesn't do this, but folks like him do it for sport, and some bit of fame or infamy. You can help yourself by taking host security very seriously. That isn't CMS security, by the way. You want to understand, especially if you're looking at open source, that which require plugins to do some of the functionality you want, that there's risks with plugins because multiple developers have been working on those. You want to obviously have a plan for the failure of your developer. Nobody likes to see that happen, but you want to have a contingency plan as part of your security. And then lastly, SEO. Outside of a frustrating profession of trying to, kind of anticipate and figure out what Google's up to, you want to make sure that your CMS has the basics of the basic equipment to do good SEO. And my favorite analogy on SEO tools is that, what we're looking at here on a sample CMS are essentially pieces of equipment to do SEO. It's like a gym membership, but that doesn't it doesn't fill the void of having to go to the gym every day and work out with this equipment that your CMS has provided. So just make sure when you're asking questions to look at the SEO module in the CMS and make sure it's going to allow you to work out the way you need to do good SEO these days. Julie, I'm a couple minutes over. I had promised to do this in about 30-35 minutes, but we're roughly on time. I do want to turn it back to you and see if we have questions from the audience that Adam and I might be able to address.
We've got a couple questions, and I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please chat them in the GoToMeeting control panel under the Questions tab. So first up is, can you explain in more detail the security concerns in open source versus proprietary systems?
Sure. Adam, do you want to take that for me?
Sure. This is Adam, obviously. I think when it comes to security, there's a few things that need to be kept in mind. And often, again, and Joe's example earlier was kind of general, and he stated that of open source being less secure and proprietary being more secure. And there's a few components to that. one, I think, solid example is WordPress. So WordPress is an open source product, and if you think about what open source projects are, it just simply means that there's more developers looking at it. And theoretically, if there's more developers looking at it, it should be more secure because they're fixing the holes in its security. That's true to a point, but keep in mind that malicious, entities like hackers can also see that code and look for that exploitation. So there's that component. Then when it comes to some open source projects, there's also the use of, say, plugins. Well, you have your nice and secure open source CMS, and then you add on all these third-party plugins from developers who you don't know. That could be opening up your secure CMS into new sorts of back doors. That leads into another component which has to do with market share. Often a proprietary CMS won't be targeted by hackers simply because it has a low market share. But as we've seen with WordPress in the recent years, so many people are using it for so many things it wasn't intended for. Again, WordPress was designed to be a blogging engine, and that's it. But now people are using it for e-commerce. And then as the market has grown to enjoy using WordPress more hackers can say, well, we should find exploits for this. And because all the code is right there, it's easier for them to do so. So that is kind of a rough outline of when you're looking at open source and security, why it might not necessarily be intuitive. Of course, you could find easily the reverse example where the biggest proprietary project that probably everyone knows, Windows, is inherently known for being insecure. It's just, there's always, every month there's new patches, but that has to do with the fact that its market share is so large, even though it is proprietary, people aggressively want to attack it. So those are, I guess, hopefully an answer to the question of considering security on both open source and proprietary systems.
Yeah, I just want to build on
Joe,
that.
do you have anything to add, or you want to go ahead?
I'm sorry, Julie. I just want to build on that, and not answering the question, but it sounds like we're just letting WordPress have it. But by the way, we use WordPress on our site for our blog. We love it, and so we just want to talk openly, as we have, about what the pros and cons. I'm sorry, Julie. Go ahead with your next question.
Okay, sorry. Next up, how many firms have integrated web and proposal systems or keep them separate?
Wow, that's a big question. I don't even know that I have a very good answer to that. I can't answer it absolutely how many. I can answer it a different way, and I'd say it this way. Roughly half of our clients are using CMS just for the web, and roughly another half are also plugging in proposal systems into the mix. And that sounds like a cop-out, but I can't tell you absolutely how many, but it's maybe a 50-50 answer.
Okay.
And there's reasons for each.
Okay. Next question is, what is your opinion of the CMS Umbraco? I'm not familiar with it. Adam, are you? I'm not familiar. I know the name.
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. So Umbraco, or however you want to pronounce it, is a solid CMS if you're willing to invest. I think that Umbraco is the classic example of a very large project, a very large software. And it is designed to be very scalable, but with scalability comes significant investment, especially in a product such as that. So I don't think, it's hard to say if there's like a negative or positive opinion to be given, but with any large CMS, because I'd say Umbraco is probably of the larger open source CMSs, with any sort of CMS of that scale, there's a lot of investment towards installation, towards securing, towards customizing, and you find a much smaller pool of developers for it. So hopefully that kind of paints the picture. Evaluating whether or not it's worth the investment is kind of part of the research and part of the right question to ask when looking forward into it.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that by saying, and I can say this with 98% certainty, we've never developed in it, so we don't know it well enough to give you, an insider's assessment of it.
Okay. Next up, any endorsement of Sitecore for a medium to medium large law firm? How does it compare to OneNorth BDS suite?
I can't speak to OneNorth because I'm not familiar with it. Do you have any general advice to share on Sitecore, Adam?
Sure. So Sitecore is a CMS that's gaining a lot of popularity, and basically Sitecore has found its market in the firms that love Windows, and they love everything about Windows, and they said, well, I wish there was kind of like a Windows-based CMS or data management system, and then Windows would always say, oh, well, there's SharePoint, and then people have found that SharePoint is not exactly what Windows promised it would be as far as a CMS, and actually Windows is kind of like backing off of SharePoint as that CMS solution, and Sitecore is rapidly taking its place. The key about Sitecore, as far as I guess an endorsement might go, it is intended for large firms. I would say even medium-large firms might be on the fence, but it is such an immense CMS that is designed to be literally infinitely scalable. And with that, its server infrastructure and securing that server infrastructure takes a lot of time and planning. And because it's such a large tool and there's such an enormous set of details that go into building a Sitecore site, it's very easy to go down the wrong rabbit hole and be very, very sad. And unfortunately, a lot of firms that use Sitecore don't take the time to have that planning, and it might just be the IT department saying, oh yeah, Sitecore, we can do that, and they build it, and then they have to hire a whole other team in to come and fix it. So I would say if Sitecore is what you need because you want per-user personalization and really in-depth analytics and like infinite data scalability from everything from your HR to your website, it's probably a product worth looking at. But taking the time to do it right is just so important with Sitecore. And I'm sorry that I can't give it a better comparison to OneNorth's product.
Okay. Next up, do I have to have a separate CMS to update my mobile site, or is that something that can be integrated with the CMS used to update our firm's main site?
I have an answer to that, Adam, but I'm more interested in yours. The kind of rule of thumb, and we see this more and more often, and this actually kind of harkens back to the proposal question. If you're entering your content twice, something is probably wrong. And overwhelmingly, your content management system should be able to update all of your site's entities at once, whether that be like a mobile site, a desktop site, or a single responsive site. You should just be able to add that content into one place. And overwhelmingly, you see people who want the same kind of functionality in their proposal generator. So they say, well, it'd be easier for me to just edit my content in my CMS and have it push or be pulled into my proposal generator. So I think your CMS should be able to edit both sites independently, assuming that your desktop site and your mobile site are intertwined. There are many people who say, nope, these are totally different services, totally different sites with totally different purposes and viewership. So that's kind of the on-the-fence answer to that question. But overwhelmingly, I think you should have a single CMS for both a mobile and desktop presence. Yeah, I endorse that. And unless it's unless something is being done radically different on mobile, then one CMS should serve both. And if it's responsive design, it does it by definition.
Okay. All right, next up we've got how messy is switching to another CMS system?
How messy? I don't. Well, that's a hard question. I'm not sure how to answer that question. I mean, it's. I guess I'd answer it two ways. If you, we will take out the house analogy here. If you're building a new house, a brand new website, and you are at the same time looking at a CMS, then it's a clean cut. It's not messy at all. I mean, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's important, but it's not messy. I guess I'll have to infer that the question is, if I have an existing site and I'm not dramatically changing it, how messy is it to do a new back end? And I don't know the answer to that. Adam, do you?
I think, unfortunately, like most of these questions, the answer is it depends. Definitely, when it comes to moving from one CMS to another, you have to think of scale and how scalable your CMS was. So let's take an example of, say you have your nice little site, and it's your site's running on WordPress. Again, this is to endorse it. But WordPress is very easy to use. It's very friendly in its back end and how it works, and it's easy to enter content. And you want to scale that up, and you say, oh, I want a new CMS with a bunch of new features. Well, you'll go to perhaps a new vendor, or you'll look at another piece of software, and you'll say, oh, well, this obviously has all the features WordPress had. Page creation, navigation control, media uploads. Well, that's great. And so now, the mess comes from migrating that data, because more often than not, there's not just like a push button move from WordPress to X CMS. So there's always the mess, going with the house analogy, of moving your stuff from your apartment into your brand new home. So that tends to be fairly standard. The reverse, however, makes things infinitely more difficult. So say you have Sitecore, and you have this enormous mansion of a CMS with all your stuff in it, because that's what you do when you have a larger house, you put more stuff in it. And then you want to scale that down to WordPress, which is an apartment. Well, obviously you deal with the fact that you lose that garage and the stairs and all that other sort of stuff. But when you're trying to move all your content and features into that apartment, you run out of room very quickly. And that is often where the mess comes from, of when you're moving from a CMS to a CMS that doesn't have the same features you have come to love and expect. So often the two big components are feature transference and data migrations. That's where the mess comes from. And that can be on a scale of, if you have a really good partner in the process, kind of easy to do and just takes a little bit of content moving, to, there are tiers and everyone hates the situation levels of mess.
Okay. We've got just one more question, which is, what if the system we choose works for now, but it doesn't align with our marketing goals next year?
Wow, these are hard questions. This is a good audience. I would say, hearkening back to the point of, do you know, the questions to ask, do you know what you want it to do here and now? I think that's most important. We think that the cloud and new features that are delivered through the cloud help to alleviate some of the future uncertainty. But I do think if you're not sure what's going to happen with your firm a year from now, you might not want to be investing a major capital improvement in the CMS and the new website to begin with, but that's being flipped. But I do, our advice is worry most about the here and now, but keep an eye on the function and features that you imagine might be important to you in the future. The ones that we haven't all imagined are, if we could do that, we all would have different jobs, right? So.
Okay, actually, wait, I think one more question just came through. How do you feel about the new website design software Adobe Muse? Are either of you all familiar with that?
I'm not.
And given my little contact with Adobe Muse, I don't really feel comfortable speaking to it in kind of a general form like this. So I'm going to reserve my judgment until I know more about it and when I have more experience with it. So we're going to, I guess, field that one.
Kim, I can follow up with you after the webinar on that one. And then one more just came through. What are your thoughts on the frequency of refreshing a website?
Let's see. We think websites should be refreshed constantly. So I'll take our own as a good example. And by the way, I want to come out and say, I know we only have a minute left, so I'll make this quick. But there's a difference between a complete redo and a room refresh. And there's also a difference between a complete redo, a room refresh, and putting fresh content on your site. So we think fresh content should be happening always. We think room refreshes need to be happening periodically, just as you do in your own house. So an example would be like Archer North. They moved from a news and events kind of, uninspired page to more of a resource center. They didn't redo their whole site. They did a room over or a career site, or name that page that needs to be, or an industry page. So we think you should be making home improvements constantly, maybe a couple rooms per year. Full site makeovers, the timeline is typically, it used to be 5 to 7. We're seeing it contract because of technology down to 3 to 5 years. Imagine that.
Okay, Joe, those are all the questions we have. Do you have any more last-minute thoughts before I wrap everything up?
No, just to thank everybody.
Okay, yes, thank you all for joining us again today for another webinar in our Brand Thinking series. Just to note that the slide deck and video of the presentation, we will post it on our website, post it on our YouTube page, and we'll also email it out to everyone who registered for the webinar. And also check your website, your inbox, and our social media pages for all the details of our next webinar as well. So thank you guys. Bye.